One. Welcome back, everybody, to Hoops HD. It
Woohoo!
is Monday, January 13th, a little after 9 o'clock Eastern. That means it is time for Monday Night Football.
Yeah, it
Rams,
is.
Vikings. Oh, wrong
Well,
show.
Yeah. I want to watch. I want to watch basketball.
Uh,
Stupid
this is the
football.
Hoops HD Report. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood. We got Matt Sikowski and John Titel up top here. Down below, David Griggs. And back with us again from Bracketeer.org, it's Rocco Miller. And we've got a lot of games, a lot of action this past week to get through. And uh, I think that's about it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Campbell Elon, the spotlight game tonight. It's because of some football game. I don't know, but that's what I'm watching. I'm watching Elon
We'll,
Campbell.
we'll be
We won't. We're
discussing
not.
that one
Yeah,
Wednesday
we won't
night
be
during Under the
discussing.
Radar.
Yeah, we might. Well, no. Yeah, Elon. We'll be discussing Elon. So
Let's pull up the screen share here, and I thought this would be a good week to go back to starting with the SEC because it is by far and away the best conference in the nation. I don't
we're
think there's any
starting
doubt
with
on
the
that.
SE. Chad, I was quite proud of myself that it only took me a minute to take the show completely off the rails. But then you rallied, and now we're talking about the SEC.
We are talking about the SEC, and uh, why don't we just start with the new number one team in the nation? Although, quite frankly, Rocco, in my opinion, they've been the number one for quite a while, but finally the pollsters caught up. Auburn, the Auburn Tigers, just keep winning. The win at Texas, the win at South Carolina, well, they struggled there this weekend.
Yeah, they did. And a little bit of a test from Texas last week as well. Of course, the big news is Janai Brome and his injury status. Uh, Great news for the Tigers as his MRI came back mostly clean. It's a bad ankle sprain, but he could be back as soon as I think maybe 2 games missed. But we'll track that as we go. But I think they'll definitely be getting him back, and that would have been a major problem if the National Player of the Year went down at this stage of the season. So long term, they're in good shape, and
Yeah.
obviously, they've gotten such great play from guys like Baker Mazzara and Cardwell and Pettiford Johnson. I mean, they're so deep and loaded that they were able to pull through without him. Credit to South Carolina, they brought it all game long and just fell short in that last minute. That the Tigers were there for the upset, but they just couldn't make enough plays to get it done.
And
Yeah.
I want to echo what Rocco said about Janai Broom. That is a great story. This is, I mean, you hate to see anybody get hurt under any circumstance, but Auburn has a very special team this year, and he's a big part of that special team. And granted, Auburn, while they certainly have a rich history, they're not a Duke, a North Carolina, a UCLA. They're not someone that's been to multiple Final Fours and won national championships. This is arguably their best shot ever at possibly winning one. And granted, you don't like to see anybody get hurt, but it was, as a fan of the sport, I think a relief to all of us to learn that he will be back.
Yeah, it was a scary looking injury when it happened. When they were helping him off the court, I was scared that the way that he couldn't put any pressure at all on that ankle,
Yeah.
that
Oh, I
foot.
thought he'd broken his ankle. I did.
But that is good news. Technically, still is out indefinitely, but as Rocco said, it could be within a week or so that he's back, which would be great for this team, especially with a brutal SEC schedule. Uh, but Matt, the team that had been number one in the nation actually fell to number six. Tennessee, going back almost a full week now, they got manhandled by Florida but then they did bounce back with the road win at Texas.
Yeah, going one-on-one on a road trip isn't so bad. Just the fact you lost by 30 in one of those games
Mm.
hurts you a little bit, especially the predictive metrics. Still strong in the resume. I think they're still solidly on the one line for now. But but one of those I wouldn't recommend having too many of those games this year.
And Griggs, we got to talk a little about this Florida Gators team. Not only did they beat Tennessee by 30, they also went to Arkansas, picked up a nice road win over the weekend.
Yeah, good week for Florida. And it's just amazing when you look at this conference. Either one of them. Like I know you got Alabama there.
Mm.
You look at the remainder of the schedule, and it seems like half your games are against potential protected seeds. So, but to beat Tennessee into submission, just beat them like a drum at home, and then go on the road and play in front of an Arkansas team that, quite frankly, had a huge sense of urgency coming into that game. Really good week for the Gators. Really impressive.
Yeah, and Title, I know there's a couple teams, but why don't we start with Mississippi State and Title, another team that actually is coming off of the loss to Kentucky, but they did have the win at Vanderbilt before that this past week.
Yeah, Coach Chris Jans only has 2 losses this year, 10 points to Butler and Tempe in November, 5 at home to Kentucky last Saturday. The bad news is they head to Auburn tomorrow. The good news, as Rocco just shared, Janai Broom will not be in uniform. Great defense, 10 steals a game, number 10 in the nation. And while the star of the show is their point guard, Josh Hubbard, with 17 points and 3 assists a game, their jack of all trades is senior forward Cameron Matthews. He only plays 26 minutes a game, averaging 9.7 boards, 4 assists. He shoots 61% from the field. He leads the SEC with almost 3 steals a game. And in this era of one-and-done freshmen or guys who transfer to a different school every single year, his next game for this veteran will be his 150th in a Bulldog uniform. I have them as a 3 seed right now.
Yeah, Mississippi State. That, like I said, they had that split of the week, and we can just keep going another round with it with this conference. And why don't we, Rocco? How about another team that had an amazing week? The Georgia Bulldogs. I mean, how about that? You not only do you beat Kentucky by a nice amount, you then followed up with beating an Oklahoma team that had been nationally ranked, no longer is, but had been at the time.
Yeah, Georgia's playing fantastic. They've dominated, at least at home. I mean, they've dominated all their home games by double digits. The only one that they didn't win by double digits is one of our favorite MEAC teams, South Carolina State. Gave them a scare back on December 29th. But yeah, the way they handled Oklahoma down the stretch and Kentucky, similar fashion down the stretch in that game, impressive. I think the big question about Georgia is what can they do on the road? Have limited sample size. They've only played at Ole Miss where they fell quite a bit short, and at Georgia Tech's not moving the needle enough. So I think what it comes down to for Georgia is road performance. They'll have a huge test at Tennessee Wednesday. I'm not sure if they're up for that, but this is a talented team. Asa Newell is just one of several amazing freshman stories across the country. They run a lot of offense through him. They found a gem in the transfer portal with Dakota LeFew, who was playing for Mount St. Mary's last year. He's really jumped up big time for Georgia. One of the best players in the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference in your neighborhood there, Chad, last year. So really nice job by the staff to build this roster. I think that's sustainable, and they do look like a tournament team to me.
Well, Rocco, let me ask you here. When you look at the road schedule remaining for Georgia, at Tennessee, at Arkansas, at Florida, at Alabama, at A&M, at Auburn, last 2, at Texas, at South Carolina, this could be a great team that only has 2 road wins on the season. And I would still say they probably belong in the NCAA tournament just because of they're not going to have any mediocre teams to play on the road.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to win a lot of home games to make that acceptable. But you're right; like they'll be underdogs in most of those games, and you would say that like the South Carolina road game, and we'll see where Arkansas ends up. Arkansas is in a world of hurt right now. If they get them soon, they got to knock them off. That's a chance to get one early.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
A bit of a bit of bracketology trivia for everyone, and I know a lot of the people on the panel know this. No one has ever received an at-large or been seated inside the bubble with fewer than 2 true road wins. So Georgia, again, I always say that you can't think categorically, but it would still be at first. They better find a way to win at least one more away from home.
Yeah, at least one. I think they need 2 in the league, so that'll give them 3 total.
Matt, one other team that people are almost forgetting about is Chris Beer's Ole Miss team here, and they're cruising along 3 wins in a row now, with a huge week ahead at Alabama and at Mississippi State.
Yeah, I mean, look at the top, like 6-2 in the top 2 quadrants, three of their Q1 wins away from home. So that's setting up nicely to where, yeah, they're not quite a protected seed probably right now, but not too far off that. Like, and that definitely in play, they finished strong. And then they played a much better schedule this year, number 90 non-conference system schedule. I remember last year when they're around the bubble, that was a killer. They played, what I believe, in the 300. So improved team, improved schedule, and much improved placement from even at this time last year, despite the record being about the same.
Yeah, and we could probably do the entire show on the SEC. We didn't even discuss teams like A&M and Alabama. But real quick, here's the upcoming schedule. And Ty, when you look at this upcoming schedule, once again, I think you can literally circle every game on this schedule here. Maybe not South Carolina Vanderbilt, but that's the only maybe I would think that you don't circle this week.
Yes, we could spend the whole show on just the SEC schedule. You're correct.
Uh, but literally, there are just some absolutely amazing games coming up here. Griggs, go
Well, I
ahead.
got nothing to do tonight. Let's just, I mean, let's keep it going till 2 and
Well,
3
let's
a.m.
talk about Saturday. We got Auburn at Georgia. We got Alabama,
Yeah.
Kentucky. We got the Egg Bowl game there. We got
My
wow.
God.
This conference is insane.
It really is. Wow.
Now we know
Tomorrow,
why. Now we know why there's entire SEC college baseball shows dedicated to just the league. The basketball has become that as well.
yeah, the basketball is actually as good as the fans think the football is. The basketball actually is that good. Tomorrow, a random regular Thursday night in early January. Nothing
Tuesday
much,
night.
just 3 top 15 games.
Yeah, it's Tuesday night, but Mississippi
Or
State,
Tuesday night,
Auburn, Ole Miss, Alabama, A&M, Kentucky all tomorrow night. And throw in the Missouri-Florida game, by the way. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I mean, Missouri, not that far off, is getting votes in both the polls as well. Let's jump over to the Big 12 conference, though. And Titel, I want to start kind of in the middle of the conference with the Baylor Bears, who absolutely destroyed Cincinnati this week. And then I know you were very happy they picked up the road win at Arizona State as well. And this is a Baylor team that I haven't quite figured out this year. Are they really that good or not?
We'll see. It's too early to tell because they're
Okay.
a bit of a home court hero. All 4 of their losses are away from home. They finally won a true road game last Saturday with the OT win at ASU to improve to 3-1 in conference play. Huge game on Tuesday when they head to Tucson to face my red hot Wildcats. They still need to work on their perimeter defense. They're allowing 37% behind the arc. That's bottom 30 in the nation. And while Miami transfer Nordshad Omir deserves a ton of credit, he's averaging a double-double. The 2 best scorers behind him are a pair of freshman guards. You got VJ Edgecombe, who's a McDonald's All-American, and point guard Robert Wright. They've combined for 25 points, 8 boards, and 8 assists. I have them as a 6 seed.
Rocco, he mentioned his Arizona Wildcats. This team was, I believe, 4-5 in mid-December. Now run off 6 straight wins. I think it's one of the hottest teams in the nation, and I'm starting to turn into a believer in this team. Are you?
Yeah, I mean they're a high octane squad, and I think if you don't have the athletes to run or slow down in any kind of transition plan to slow down them, you're in trouble. Everybody out here in the West learned that the hard way over the years against Tommy Lloyd, and now the Big 12's learning that. They ran clinics at West Virginia and home to UCF. That's an 8-point final score, but they had that thing well in hand by double digits down the stretch. So. Now we get to start getting some more tests. They'll have Baylor at home tomorrow, and they go to Texas Tech Saturday. Both Scott Drew and Grant McCaslin will probably have a little bit better plan. I would say nothing against DeVries or Dawkins, but that's really what it takes. You got to be able to slow them down. And obviously, Arizona's a team with a big-time alpha in Caleb Love. When he's going, it's really hard to slow them down. I've loved the transfer from Campbell. We loved him in the CIA. Del Orso, KJ Lewis is playing pretty well. And Arizona, their 5 losses. You have one in OT, one by 3 to UCLA, another one by 5 to Oklahoma. So a lot of those results could have changed. Things are getting kind of balanced out now.
And they're playing 8 on 5 in that Wisconsin game. Given that
That's
foul
true.
in that one.
That's true.
Rocco from the top rope, just totally slamming DeVries and Dawkins. Wow.
Matt,
They already lost to DeVries, so there's the credit.
Matt, a couple of things. Why don't we start with Iowa State here next? And Iowa State, Texas Tech had them on the ropes over the weekend. They found a way to do what great teams do, though, and win that game.
Yeah, that's one of those that looks like a 1 seed. That's what a 1 seed or a 2 seed does in a game where hostile environment, good, not necessarily great opponent, but pretty good opponent. In a game the good team absolutely had to have because their resume is still fairly barren. Iowa State still found a way to pull it out in OT, and that's one of those why I think they're still on the 1 line as of now, and I think I have a great shot at being a 1 seed at the end of the year.
Oh, for sure.
Griggs, Kansas. I think for the first time all season, they look like Kansas this week.
They did. A great week. Went out and won big against an Arizona State team that is, not necessarily a protected seed by any means, but certainly no pushover. And for them to go out and win that decisively, and they go to Cincinnati, who's a good defensive team, and basically, like, while it was a rock fight and it was a fugly game, at no point was Kansas not in control. So yeah, to say that they looked like Kansas is accurate. And I think it's also accurate to say Cincinnati looked very much like Cincinnati in that game.
Tata, let me throw one other team at you here. UCF. They're a team that I think we mentioned this last night when doing our bracket rundown show. I think everybody almost wanted to write them off after they lost to Kansas by 3 million points. But I know that they did just come off the loss to your Wildcats, but they played well in that game, and they have a couple nice wins of the profile, don't they?
Well, after losing by 51, when you can go to Tucson and lose by 8, that's actually a moral victory, I think. So you're correct to point that out. And when you look back to November, which I know is a long time ago, if they had not lost a tripler to LSU, like, this could be a tournament resume, because you'd have those 3 tier 1 losses and you've already got some tier 1 wins. I think they're going to keep fading, unfortunately. A bit of a home court hero, 9-1 at home. And I think that the schedule just is brutal. I mean, they can, I don't know if they should beat ASU. They certainly can. But then hosting Houston and going to Iowa State, I think they're going to get closer to 51-point losses than single-digit losses.
Fair enough. Upcoming schedule here real quick in the Big 12. Tons of really good games, starting with tomorrow night's Baylor-Arizona game we already discussed. And circle this on Wednesday. I mean, Kansas at Iowa State, about as big as it gets in the nation, I think, despite what we saw in the SEC coming up.
Yeah, I mean that's almost that's almost like an average SEC game. That's how good that game is.
And that, I think, has sort of replaced the border war, at least for conference. That Kansas Iowa State rivalry is fairly heated now.
Yeah, yeah. It's arguably the thing about the border war is that it was 90% heat. I mean, it was a great rivalry, but it was more about hatred than it was national significance a lot of the time. Not that there weren't great Missouri teams, but one dominated in football and the other dominated in basketball. But what made it so compelling was, God, did they hate each other? It was great.
And Greg's talking about teams that hate each other. Saturday, BYU, Utah.
Probably the most, again, I don't want to say it's the biggest rivalry. That isn't correct, because it doesn't have the national relevance or significance. There is no rivalry more heated than that one. There isn't. That is just an objectively true statement. If you don't believe me, go there.
Let's jump over to the Big Ten Conference. And Rocco, when we look at the standings here, we've got both Michigan teams now at undefeated, both at 5-0 in the conference, and both coming off some pretty good weeks, 2-0 weeks. Maybe we start with Sparty, though, who I know they really took a 2-year Washington team back on Thursday.
They did. Yeah, that game was over before it started. But I thought it was really impressive how they had a little bit of a joust on the road at Northwestern for the first 10 or so minutes, and then just turned on the gas going into halftime, which is what great teams do. And then Northwestern really had to readjust at the half, and Michigan State was able to cruise out to a 10-point win. That's going to do some really good things for the Michigan State's hopes for a protected seed. I've got them as a 4 in the bracket today. They've been better than I thought they'd be coming into the season. I mean, their only 2 losses are Memphis and Kansas on neutral courts. They've got a collection of nice wins. And it's not only that, it's the way they're playing. You know, they have a top 11 defense, top 25 offense, a lot of great balance. Jeremy Fears has been another one of those amazing freshman stories, along with Jace Richardson. So the nice job by Izzo, because I thought they got a little stagnant over the last couple of years. That injected some offensive and athletic juice to the already steady veterans that he has with Akins, Holloman, etc. And Cohen Carr is a freak athlete. A lot of people think Cooper Flagg's dunk was the dunk of the year, but I think Carr's got some awesome dunks too. And so there's just a lot of new, exciting things happening compared to the same old Sparty. And it could be enough juice to get them the Big Ten title.
One team though, Titel, that is starting to look good. They had a real nice week was the Purdue Boilermakers. Not only the road win at my Rutgers, at my Scarlet Knights, but also taking care of Nebraska easily over the weekend.
This team lost back-to-back games right before Christmas, but they got a great gift from Santa, a 5-game winning streak. They're 5-1 in conference play. All 4 of their losses are to top 50 teams. And this week they got a road trip west. They go all the way to play the Huskies and the Ducks. The key for them has been three-point shooting, number 6 in the nation, making 40% behind the arc. And I thought they'd drop off this year when you lose a 2-time National Player of the Year like Zach Edey, but they've done exactly what a public land-grant research university must do, and that is keep the best players in your state from leaving your state. And they have one of the best junior classes in the country. You get returning All-American point guard Braden Smith from Westfield, Indiana, forward Trey Kaufman-Renn from Sellersburg, Indiana, and shooting guard Fletcher Lawyer from, you guessed it, Fort Wayne, Indiana. I have him as a 5 seed.
Matt, I got to ask you, one of the things that we were going to be paying attention to a lot this year was how these former Pac-12 teams did on these road trips. This was a road trip week uh, for Oregon, for UCLA, and for USC, and for Washington as well. But it didn't go very well for them.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rocco. But
It's part of the deal.
especially, but Oregon, on one hand, goes out. They win at Ohio State. They win at Penn State. UCLA, on the other hand, goes and they lose to both Maryland and to Rutgers tonight. Is that kind of a sign of where these teams are going now?
It might be. I mean, UCLA got a lot of stuff off the court to worry about with the unfortunate devastation with the fires in LA. So,
Right.
I think that's on their mind a little bit. I mean, Matt Norlander from CBS Sports did a great interview with Cronin, I think, right before I believe before tonight's Rutgers game. But yeah, and his mind is clearly not really on the court, in that. So, unfortunately, you saw a little bit of bad. It was right before the Michigan game, but even at that point, you knew things weren't great even at that point, and then it's gone downhill. This is like a road trip they want to definitely want to forget, try to get back home, and hopefully everything's okay for his home, Cronin's home, all the players, and that of the campus, and just regroup. It's still a pretty talented team that this could be a tough road trip. They're gonna be tough road trips anyway, but this compared with the combined with the off court circumstances, that's why that's a week to forget for them, and hopefully things are okay where it really matters. Yeah.
One of the West Coast teams I mentioned here, real quick, Griggs. If you looked at the scores Wednesday night, you would said that USC, they go and they get blown out by Indiana. Illinois is cruising, and then they
Yeah.
go head to head, and USC goes to Illinois on Saturday, picks up almost an inexplicable win in my book.
Yeah, that's the perfect word for it. It was
Hmm.
probably it was the biggest head scratcher of the week, or one of the biggest head scratchers, and maybe one of the ones all year, where two teams that seem to be going in different directions very quickly, Illinois being really good and USC not, just not the result you were expecting. I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't really even follow the game because I just thought the outcome was a foregone conclusion. And it wasn't until about the end where I realized I needed to turn it on because USC was ahead.
Uh, now, Illinois was down a player, Titel, correct? One of the top players.
Hesperus
Yeah.
Jakacionis.
But even that, shouldn't you still find a way to beat a USC team that was not looking very good when you play them at home?
Yes, Chad, but if you can go back to math class, when you lose by 10 and you're missing a guy who's a double-digit scorer, guess what happens?
Doesn't somebody else fill in with him?
Apparently not.
Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Is find somebody to fill in?
Supposed to.
Uh, uh, I guess let's go jump to the upcoming schedule here in the Big Ten. We've got some interesting games. Ohio State at Wisconsin coming up tomorrow night. We've also got what else we got there? Purdue at Oregon on Saturday. Maybe Wisconsin at USC suddenly becomes interesting on Saturday as well after what happened tonight. So who knows? Not tonight, but last time out. But over in the Big East, and Matt, let me start with you here. You are the Marquette guy, and your team is in sole possession of first place. Did not play over the weekend though, right? You only had the one game
No, yeah,
this week.
yeah. Got one of the nice little quote buys you have during Big East play, where two weeks you only have one game a week, and this was one of the ones for Marquette, which actually didn't come to too bad of a time, in that I think some of the guys are still playing banged up, and like Cam Jones, the adjustment of everyone knows how good Cam Jones is. Well, so do Big East coaches, and he's seeing double, triple teams, junk defenses, everything you can see. And so it's a nice time to maybe go in and just take that week off, and then come in with a new plan. Now that like, hey, he's a Player of the Year candidate and first or second team All American. So you get the entire game plan his way, and now it's time to adjust to find out how he can get his, still make sure his teammates get theirs, and DePaul tomorrow should not be a too bad of an option to get everything a little bit healthy here because DePaul plays no defense.
Yeah, yeah. Rocco, UConn Huskies, two-time defending national champions, but they lose a game at Villanova over the week. They did bounce back with the win at Georgetown, but is this concern for UConn, or is it maybe that Villanova's got things straightened out, or maybe a little both?
Well, I think UConn's weathering the storm without Liam McNeely.
Right.
Like he's been out a couple games already. He's got a couple more weeks to go till he's expected back. So it's a little bit of patchwork. Obviously, Carabon's still out there, and Mahaney's actually starting to fill in a little bit. He was a big hero, I know, at the game. I think Titel was there against Georgetown, and Georgetown made a charge late there, but UConn was able to withstand that, and I thought that was an impressive win due to the fact that Georgetown's on the rise, and it was their best crowd in forever, and UConn still, even shorthanded, handled it just fine. So I'm less worried about them because I think long term they're going to be really scary by March, unless something happens where McNeely's out for the year. But otherwise, I think they're making their way.
Yeah, and when you look at these next four games, all four of them are not just winnable, but probable wins, and that would put them at 17-4 going into that big game at Marquette. And
they might get McNeely back for that.
Yeah,
if it all works out. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that I love doing it so much. I'm going to do it again, pointing out that this team finished 8th in Maui. It isn't that I hate UConn; it's just that I love doing that because I know Zach's watching. But outside of that, they're likely going to be 17-1 going into the Marquette game. That's pretty damn good. And as much as I like to point out Maui for my own personal amusement, with the exception of that 72 hours, this has been a solid protected seed, probably top 10 performing team.
Titel, should we just ink them in for a win over Creighton in their next game? I mean, the Blue Jays were one of the top teams heading into the season in the Big East, and they're starting to play a little better, aren't they?
Yeah, but hard to figure out. I kind of gave up on them after the double whammy last month. Texas Tech transfer Pop Isaacs goes down for the year with a hip injury, and they got smoked by 24 at Georgetown. I know because I was there. But they did bounce back nicely. 3 wins and just an 8-point road loss at Marquette, which is probably a good loss.
Yeah.
I wish they'd be a little more aggressive on defense. Bottom 5 in the nation. They only force 8 turnovers a game, which is ironic because they have a 3-time conference defensive player of the year in 7-foot center Ryan Kalkbrenner. And of course, the inside-outside combo is the other guy, 6'1" point guard Stephen Ashworth. Even though he actually missed a free throw at Butler last Saturday, he still leads the country 96.8% at the free throw line.
Wow.
Yeah, they got I was just going to mention, they got the 22-year-old Montenegrin who's a freshman finally starting to play now. He hasn't gotten more than 7 minutes in a game yet, but he could be a weapon down the stretch as they're looking for some depth with Isaacs out.
Upcoming schedule here in the Big East, and we've got that Creighton-UConn game on Saturday as one of the key games this week here. Marquette at DePaul and hosting Xavier. You look at the Johnnies also, they're going to be hosting Georgetown and then at Seton Hall on Saturday. So,
that Georgetown Villanova game is intriguing. I don't think Georgetown is all the way inside the bubble, and I know Nova still has a lot of weight to lift, but for a game that that doesn't feature 2 teams that are inside the bubble, that's a pretty intriguing game.
Yeah, we may not be talking at all about the loser of that game after, but the winner we maybe discuss, especially if they could both pick up their wins before that. Xavier for Villanova, DePaul for Georgetown. Let's jump over to the ACC here, and Matt, let's start at the top of the conference. Cooper Flag, I gotta confess at this point, even though he cost him some games early in the season, had a pretty good week.
Yeah, no, the 42 on Saturday, which they needed basically all 42 because Notre Dame couldn't miss from three, so that was huge that he pulled off that type of performance. And I think it's one of those. Hey, Duke, they committed to him early on that he's gonna be their featured guy. They don't really have a true point guard, so like the ball's in his hands most of the time now, and it works. So even though they said it hurt him with those turnovers down the stretch against Kentucky, against Kansas, they're better for it. And man, like never would I think that a team in the ACC, not even a third of the way through the year, would have, I think, something like 1 in 3 odds of going undefeated in conference play. Like it's way higher than you would think.
And Rocco, last week we were looking at, yeah, well, Duke was the power in this conference. You kind of look at Clemson and Pitt as be the next two teams up. How about Louisville? They beat both Clemson and Pitt this week.
Yeah, I mean Louisville is ahead of Pittsburgh now for me, and ahead of Clemson. So they've earned it, and I think they're playing their best basketball clearly, and they're only going to perhaps get better. They've obviously weathered the storm with those early injuries. They were down to 7 or 8 guys, but if you look at the players that are in those 7 or 8, they're pretty damn talented. I mean, you got Chucky Hepburn, Terrence Edwards, Javon Hadley. James Scott is still only 18 years old, but he's a sophomore. He was the fourth youngest player in college basketball last year at the College of Charleston as a 17-year-old. So they're just perfectly coming into their own with the veterans rallying around. Minus Scott, of course, he's still young, but Rain Smith's just played incredibly well as a leader. And so they have great balance. Everybody can shoot, and they're figuring out the defensive part of it, and that is honestly what leads to the winning. So I like Louisville's chances not only long term, but to continue to build on these wins. They'll go to the Carrier Dome or whatever it's called tomorrow.
The JMA something.
GM, JMA, yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
Wireless.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. Titel, how about the North Carolina Tar Heels? They have won 3 in a row, but they still have a profile that's kind of lacking in notable wins.
So they started the month with a double-digit loss at Louisville on New Year's Day. The X factor, an injured Seth Trimble, so he was out. They bounced back with 3 straight wins: the Irish, SMU, and NC State. So they're 4-1 in league play. They host the Bay Area schools this week, which is a long trip across the country. So I assume they're going to be 6-1 on Sunday morning. And each of their losses are to top 40, top 50 teams. A very similar resume to Arizona in terms of brutal schedule, but stacked wins. And returning All-American shooting guard R.J. Davis has been good, as you would expect. The surprise star is McDonald's All-American Ian Jackson. The past 6 games since the loss to Florida, 23 points and 5 boards a game, making 18 of 42 behind the arc. I have him as a 10 seed.
They got an interesting stretch at the end of January, heading into February here, where they play Pitt twice, and at Duke and at Clemson in that stretch, and they got to find a way to get a couple, at least one, maybe 2 of those games. I think.
At least 2. I'm thinking 2 or 3.
Well, I don't know. They have to get 3 of those games to make the NCAA tournament. I'm talking about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I think they need a couple of those just to, if they're not going to suffer any bad losses. But Griggs, let me go back to here. I brought this team up during our bracket rundown show last night. I want to go back to them. You want to talk about teams with a one really good win and no bad losses. What about Wake Forest?
Well, yeah, and the paper isn't bad. It isn't good enough to really probably land them in the field or in our forecasts yet, but they've really started to string together wins, and their next 2, they should be able to get Stanford at home and at Virginia Tech. And then they have the showcase, the Tobacco Road, North Carolina, and Duke at home, and they're going to be jacked for that. Those are at home, and if they can get one of those, I think that it's just going to do a lot for their confidence. Maybe not as much for their paper since they're home games, but I think the way they're playing, they're going to get. It wouldn't shock me at all to see them string together the wins that they need to in order to land inside the bubble. they stumbled a little bit out of the gate, but even when you look at their losses, guys, they're not that bad. Minus maybe the loss at Xavier.
Yeah, I agree. I think they do need another key win here, but you got the Carolina and Duke at home. You got Pitt at home. You got a road trip to Louisville.
Yeah.
Possibilities in those games. I don't know about winning at Duke at the end of the season, but possibilities
Probably
in those
not.
4 games.
Yeah. They are a home court hero, as Tytel points out, but there are winnable road games.
They
If
have
can get
they have
Virginia
2
Tech,
road wins. That's all you need. You told us that
yeah,
earlier, right?
yeah, but if they can get Virginia Tech,
If you're in the
Stanford, and Cal,
SEC,
which
yeah.
they should, that's enough.
In terms of the upcoming schedule here in the
I
conference,
just want to say, I think you all value road wins a little too much. Coming back.
I think one of the key
Blizzard
games.
must not be working tonight.
I just didn't even buy. Rocco, I think really the only game I'm really circling in the ACC, and this may be the fact that we're only circling one game, is a sign of where the ACC is the Clemson Pitt game on Saturday.
Yeah, that's clearly got implications one way or the other. Yeah, I just think some of these teams too that the league needs to, like Wake Forest, to be competitive. SMU as well. They're just honestly, I don't think they're good enough to handle all the business required. Like, we're going to sit here and talk about the Carolina and Duke and Louisville and Pittsburgh opportunities, but what about when you play Stanford and Florida State and Virginia and Notre Dame? Like, Notre Dame's got one of the best coached teams in the league. They're not a tournament team. I just see more. I see more potential slip ups than I do chances to excel, and I think that's the problem with the middle of this league.
Yeah, it's not easy to go to Notre Dame and win. It's not easy to go to Florida State and win, but you lose that game, it looks bad on the resume at the end of the day.
Right. And Stanford's going to be tough too. I mean, their center is a first-round pick. So,
Mountain West Conference. Matt, how about this Utah State team?
How about them?
Heck of a win over Boise State over the weekend.
Yeah, a couple of bounces and balls, and they're right in the rankings there, 16-1. We have as a 5 seed last night on bracket rundown, and that's probably the 5-6 range is where they are right now. And so I don't know how much more they can climb above that, but there you go. Keep winning and keep testing to see how far you can climb.
How far they
This
climb?
new metric that I love, the wins against bubble or the board or whichever, 11, and I think that's not that far off.
let's go.
Yeah.
And that is where you rank compared to every other team in the nation in a number that is calculated about your wins above the more wins that you would have versus the hypothetical bubble team, which I think is like a 45th ranked team or so in the nation. If the 45th ranked team had played your same schedule, how many more wins do you have versus they haven't? To be ranked 11th in that is a pretty darn good number. What I guess what we still don't know is how much weight is the committee going to really give to these numbers or not, and that's something we won't know until probably March.
I think it'd be more towards selection, which doesn't look like it's issued Utah State, and then come seeding, that's where the predictives might hurt them a little, because I think it's more the resumes, definitely more based selection based. I think seeding's a little more on the predictive end.
I agree with Matt, but I would say this. For the protected seed cutoff, I think it matters a lot. We've seen that in the February selection previews shows where there is a difference between a 4 seed and a 5 seed. And that's like where Utah State is right now is basically on that border. That could actually help them get one of those last 4 seeds versus being a 5 because of that cutoff.
A couple of teams are tied out. Colorado State. Haven't discussed them much this year, but they're now 4-1 in league.
So the Rams of Colorado State were just 5-5 after losing to the Rams of VCU in Nevada last month. But they have won 5 of their past 6, with just an 8-point loss to a hot New Mexico team to get back on track. And as Chad knows, they lost by 6 to Washington, 8 to VCU, and 8 to New Mexico. And as we know, good teams lose close games. So, I get it. But if you like guys who can fill up a stat sheet, then returning third-team all-conference guard Nick Clifford is your man. He did very little in 3 years at Colorado. Since transferring an hour north on I-25, he has become a superstar. He's arguably the best rebounding guard in the country. He's only 6'5". Last year, 12 points, 8 boards, 3 assists a game. This year, 17 points, 10 boards, 4 assists a game.
You mentioned that one loss to New Mexico. Rocco, how about this New Mexico team? One of the hottest teams in the entire nation right now with 7 wins in a row.
They're good. I got to see them against VCU before the holidays, and they took it to San Diego State. That never happens. That was San Diego State's first double-digit loss in almost a full calendar year. And guess who that was against? New Mexico as well. So they've got a good grip on the Aztecs, at least in the pit. The pit was rocking. Donovan Dent is absolutely phenomenal. But I think the big story lately has been the Serbian Filip Barava Kanin. I always butcher his name. Sorry about that, Philip. But yeah, I mean, he's just been splendid in these last few performances. Not only locking up the other team's best player on the front court on a defensive standpoint, but in the Wyoming win, it was really a gut check. They were tight with them until down the stretch, and he was big time to pull that game out with 16 points, 11 rebounds. Had another 9-9 in the San Diego State win. And, for New Mexico, they're continuing to try to ensure the Mountain West can get 3 teams in, assuming the Aztecs will be okay. To Tytel's point about Colorado State, I'm really curious to see how they can do in San Diego tomorrow. With playing the Aztecs off of a loss, that's going to be really, really challenging. But Colorado State has played a top 25 defense the last month. So we'll see if the Rams can make things interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting game. And Friday night, Boise State and New Mexico, another very interesting game. Dangerous Boise State team, even though they've suffered a lot of losses here.
Yeah.
Man, that Boise State Utah State game was out of control. But I think we talked about
that was one of the
night.
most entertaining games. I was so disappointed when it ended. It's like we need 5 more minutes of this. It was incredible. The last 30 seconds alone, it was great.
Oh, that building is crazy. You guys got to go to a game there. Oh, it's amazing.
I'm barred from there. But Wild Bill used to live there. It was incredible. We want Wild Bill back. Bill, if you're watching, come be on our show.
Griggs, over in the American, Memphis did what they had to do against East Carolina this weekend, and here they are, 3 games into conference play, 3-0, up to number 18 and 17 in the polls.
Yes, and I don't know. I think that if they continue to hold serve, and I realize that even with the season they've had so far, that is a big if. Rocco's pointed out that they've really kind of tripped before, but not only is every game remaining winnable, every game is a game that they are going to be decisively favored in, even when they go on the road. Not a single top 100 team remains. And you guys know, I think how the rankings work, it's sort of a ballooning process to where as long as you keep winning, even if you're winning against 4 teams, you're going to continue to go up and up in the polls. How high can Memphis get? 7th, 6th at the end of the year? And what will their seed be? I don't think they'll be on the seed list as high as they are in the rankings at the end of the year. But I do think they can get a protected seed. And despite being in a weak conference, you just had their profile up a second ago. They've kind of earned it, haven't they? I mean, they've.
Yeah.
That is, UConn. We just got done talking about them. Michigan State really good at Clemson. I think Clemson only has 1 home loss, and they're a tournament team. Ole Miss is really good. Mizzou, that's kind of blah, but that's a really, really good profile.
I got to ask Matt about them also because they have a big difference in their resume-based metrics. KPI has finally dropped out to number 3. He had them as number 1 in the nation for a good while. But the predictive metrics, which I know you're a big fan of, say, you're an 8 seed, you're a 9 seed.
This is one where almost end of the year profile of 2022 Providence. This is a lot what Memphis' profile looks now. Memphis now has to avoid a whole bunch of landmines there to make sure their profile, either it's a whole lot of Q3 and Q4, and then make sure they're on the left side of the column there, not the right side.
And they did sweat against East Carolina. I mean,
yeah. Well, you're supposed to sweat when you play basketball.
Well, good point. Yeah,
Tytel, you want to talk a little UAB?
I'm just enjoying the funniest thing Chad has said all day. That's fantastic. I had given up on the Blazers after they started 5-6. Home loss to Vermont. Neutral site lost to Longwood. Who is this team? But they've won 5 of 6, including a 5-point win at FAU last Sunday. So they're 3-1 in conference play. All 7 losses by single digits. Why, you might ask? Their opponents are shooting 77% at the free throw line. If it comes down even a little bit, they'll start to win some of those close games. And forward Yaxel Lendeborg, reigning conference defensive player of the year, reigning conference tourney MVP, but he's taken it somehow up a notch this year. 17 points, 10 boards, 4 assists a game, and shooting 59% from the field. And for you early 1990s R&B fans, best free throw shooter on the team, 94% at the line, senior guard Tony, who's done it again.
All right. Upcoming schedule. Memphis is going to be at Temple and at Charlotte. Pair of road games. Always tough to play on the road, so that's what we got to pay attention to here. But
I'll be
let's.
there, Chad.
Which one are you going to?
Charlotte.
Oh,
Sunday.
nice.
Yes.
Anyone who's in Charlotte on Sunday, go down and say hi to Rocco Miller.
Let's do it.
Great.
Get it going right.
I'll go with you if I can get off the no-fly list. How's that going, Chad, my lawyer?
We're working on that. Rocco, let me stick with you. The West Coast Conference, Gonzaga, did what they had to do this week. We'll take care of San Diego and Washington State at home. But the issue in the conference, I think maybe, is there a second bid? Is that the St. Mary's team going to get there at the end of the day? They did go 2-0 this week as well.
Yeah, I got out to St. Mary's last Tuesday, Chad, so I'm glad you asked, and had a chance to sit down with Randy Bennett for a little bit after the game. And you can tell that this team is really starting to lock in and dial in both, with his defensive principles, but also getting offensive rebounding and all these second chances that their teams have consistently been able to do the last handful of years. This team's starting to really be dialed in with that. The rotations are settling in. You saw that they had a historic game at San Diego. I know San Diego's not good, but they broke some sort of points per possession record, 1.65, I think, per possession, 101 points. It was an analytical miracle, according to Jared Burson, who does all the great research at ESPN. But that's a sign, I think, that these guys are clicking and they're dialed in each possession, which is why you see every year, right around this time of year, St. Mary's goes from like 30, 40, 50-ish in the net to the top 15, top 10. So fast forward to next month, and don't be surprised when they're in the top 15 in the net, because when they play anybody else in the bottom half of the league, they will really, really extend the lead and maintain it and pound you, which is what they did when I was there on Tuesday against Loyola Marymount. So, any kind of question, and St. Mary's will pick up some good wins too along the way. I think it's really easy to keep them in the field because of the way they dominate bad teams.
And maybe a little bit different than past years. You look at that upcoming schedule, and there's only 3 games against teams that are triple-digit nets remaining on that schedule right now, which is, I think that kind of shows having the 2 Washington State games, having the 2 Oregon State games, helping push up that schedule the rest of the season here this year.
Yeah, and that's the story of the league this year. I mean, you get these extra 2 quality teams that were never used to be a thing. There was a lot more layups built into the conference season. Now there's a grind every night. Like I was with Santa Clara Thursday for their 1-point OT win over Oregon State. And you look at the rest of Santa Clara's schedule this month, they got to go to LMU if the game happens, obviously pending the fire situation. But then they go to Gonzaga. They host Wazoo. They go to Oregon State for round 2. Then they host St. Mary's. That's their next 5. And they just beat San Francisco and Oregon State. So they had a stretch of 7 straight really hard games. And that's going to happen for every team at different stages. And St. Mary's and Gonzaga, the 2 teams, we're going to focus on for now, it's completely backloaded. So they're going to have almost all of February like that. So it's really exciting. And we're hoping somehow, some way a 3rd team can emerge. But so far, that's not an obvious choice after Washington State's unfortunate loss to Pacific, which I might add, an incredible performance by Mr. Washington, dropping 40 in Pullman, including the game-winning shot from 3. Amazing.
I would like to apologize to Wazoo. I had praised them and was talking them up, and that's why they lost to Pacific.
That also snaps a 20 game. Sorry, one last fact on that. Snapped a 20-game WCC losing streak for Pacific. What a way to end it.
What happened? I mean, you want to talk about head scratch? I mean, yeah, USC at Illinois, but what in the world was that?
Real quick, what Titel, Santa Clara? He mentioned them a little bit. Yeah, I know you had a few thoughts on them as well.
To answer the puppets question, it was your kiss of death, which you did to Dayton a couple weeks ago. So stop telling teams they're good when they're
Hey,
not.
I like, you know who I like? Arizona.
I hate you.
Ooh,
Broncos finished
ooh.
November 3-5. They were looking like the worst team in the former Conference of Champions. They lost to ASU, Stanford, and Washington. But since then, they've won 9 of 10, 3-point overtime loss at San Francisco, and the one game that Rocco was at, the 1-point overtime win last week over Oregon State. P.S. How many former Pac-12 teams are on this schedule? The leading scorer, returning first-team All-Conference guard Adama Ball, born in Paris, first 2 years of college. He played 49 straight games off the bench for my Wildcats. His next game for Coach Herb Sendek will be his 49 straight game as a starter, which makes me wonder, pourquoi n'a-t-il pas fait ça à Tucson, which is French for why didn't you do that in Tucson?
Welcome,
We're doing everything tonight. Now we're foreign
That word
language.
French, yeah. Gonzaga's going to be at Oregon State, an interesting game Thursday night. That's probably the game to circle this week. While St. Mary's possibly at Pepperdine, we're going to see what's going on, obviously, and our thoughts go out to everyone with the whole situation there in the LA area. And let's jump over to the A10. Uh,
Oh.
and
Oh.
Matt, should we just drop this conference down to under the radar at this point, especially after what Dayton has done over the course of the last week and a half here with George Washington and UMass?
Well, if you want to compound, obviously they did an awful week, and then you want to compound it. The Bodies just lost 2 in a row, and they need to have a real gaudy record, I think, to get in that large hope because they did do a whole lot out of conference. So, like, this is a week where they're thinking, hey, we have 2 bids in fairly decent shape and whatever. Now we're thinking, man, it might just be the conference tournament where they're getting in
Yeah.
and yes.
Griggs, maybe it's time to start talking a little VCU again. I know the resume's out there, but they only have 4 losses, and maybe they're going to be the best team in the conference here.
They might, and when you look at everything they have remaining, especially how disappointing St. Louis has been, and for a second it looked like Joe's and Rhodey were going to be good, but they've kind of come back down to earth. Rhodey didn't even, they haven't been that good since losing the Ocean State championship game.
So it's hiring Archie Miller?
Yeah,
sorry.
the Bonnie. If they could, if they could start to blow through that schedule, where are they going to be at the end? But here is something. If you go back to the main page there, Chad, and you look at all of those metrics, be it the net, the predictive, the merit, you're not seeing a single one in the top 50. Am I missing one? Not one. And, there's only about 44, 46, 48 teams that land inside the bubble, and they're not hitting it in any. Matt raised the question, is this a one-bid league? Is it just the tournament winner? The way that this is shaping up, I think the answer is yes. We didn't have anybody inside the bubble last night, did we, from this conference?
No, we didn't.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I thought we do have one top 50. VCU is number 45 in the Ken Palm rating.
Oh, okay, okay.
So there we go again. As I said, VCU might be the team, but Titel, maybe George Mason is the team.
I mean, for the past 2 decades, it seems like the best team from the Commonwealth of Virginia has been either VCU or Virginia. The Patriots are back in the conversation. They've won 10 of their past 12 with only a pair of road losses at Duke and Rhodey. The interior defense is amazing. 36% shooting allowed, number 4 in the nation. 62 points per game allowed, number 12 in the nation. If they can win at Dayton on Wednesday, I just might have to put them into my bracket as the A10 auto bid. And I think their best story is the well-traveled senior power forward Jalen Haynes. High school in Fort Lauderdale, post-grad year in Orlando, started college at Vatech, transferred to ETSU, redshirted last year. All he is now is one of the best shooters in the conference, 61% from the field.
Wow. I actually might actually have a couple games worth watching this week, believe it or not, in this conference.
Yes.
Both the St. Louis VCU and the George Mason Dayton game this week. The Rocco, they're going to kind of show us who the top of the conference is at least.
They will, yeah, and I agree with you on the VCU part of it. They certainly have not peaked, and I still like all their pieces. They've lost some very frustrating games. The problem now is, do they have enough meat left on the schedule to build a resume? Because they really don't have much of one still, despite the metrics liking them and the predictive side of things. And then in terms of that George Mason Dayton game, it will be a huge test for George Mason. Dayton coming off those 2 losses, I feel like that is a brutal task because they will be dialed in to try to fix that.
Yeah, Dayton might just pound them into submission here because they need this game. They know they need this game.
Is there room? I think Dayton, given what they did out of conference, I mean, if they win out, they'll be inside the bubble. But is there room? That's an interesting question, Rocco, that you just brought up. Is there enough meat? Is there room for a team to build an at-large resume uh, based on how weak the league is and how little it collectively did out of conference? Essentially, what they did is that they bloated up their records against weak teams, and you just can't do that.
Right. Yeah, I think that's become a problem, and they're now at a point where I feel like somebody's going to have to run away with the league, like a 18-2 or a
Yeah.
17. And even if St. Louis is that team, they were so hurt and so disheveled in the first 2 months that I don't even think St. Louis has an angle for an at-large. So, despite the fact that we know they're good and we know Schertz is a hell of a coach,
He's
still playing
real good.
They're still playing for an auto bid the rest of the way. So it's got to be VCU, Dayton, and Bonnie's has that angle. Rhode Island had a great record, but look at Rhode Island's resume. They don't have a quad 1 or 2 game played at all still. So they went total pastry cart, as you would say, Mr. Griggs.
Yeah.
357 non-conference strength of schedule. I don't
That
know.
is remarkable.
You might go undefeated and not get an at-large bid when you play that. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Matt, you
And
had a
yes,
thought on it?
in the chat,
I
Tytel
was
mentions
just
George
with
Washington.
you.
They're
My
good
holiday diet would love Rhode Island's schedule.
too. Yeah.
I guess on that note, let's run to final thoughts here. And Tytel, I'm going to start with you because I know you need the screen share.
I don't need it, Chad. I just like it. So
There you
I
go.
want to talk about Texas, both football and basketball, even though this is a basketball podcast. So last weekend, the Longhorns athletic program had a couple of chances to make some history, couldn't get it done on the gridiron nor the hardwood. Friday night, football team had the ball at the 1-yard line, under 4 minutes left, chance to tie the Buckeyes, maybe beat them in overtime, make it to the championship game next week. Sack, fumble, 83-yard touchdown return by Jack Sawyer. Season's over. Coming back to that, on Saturday, basketball team had a 2-point lead, under 4 minutes left, chance to beat number 1 ranked team in the nation, Tennessee, got outscored 16-10 the rest of the way, fell to 11-5 overall, 0-3 in conference play. And to paraphrase Texas superfan Matthew McConaughey, not all right, not all right, not all right.
Again.
That was perfectly timed the first time. I don't know that just.
Let's go and pull this down here. Matt, your final thoughts.
I would say, looking again here, I like the WCC. Like the top 2, I think are in pretty good shape. That's what looking at. Maybe they could sneak a 13 bit. I think Santa Clara's resume is sneaky, not bad. The thing is that they're going to have to probably get to roughly 14, 15 conference wins to get there, which is not a ton of margin for error. But hey, if they can sneak I think they are now the 3rd WCC team.
All right. Rocco.
Yeah, so hot off the press today, first mid-season bracket, posted over on bracketeer.org if you get a chance to check it out.
Check that out, guys.
And that was obviously a long exercise, as I know you guys have already gone through. But I will say this, there's a lot of bubble teams, and it's always a long list in January because we have so much runway left to cover. But there are a nice group of teams that probably might look like tournament teams, but don't have the credentials due to different things. So real quick, just as covered on the site, teams that have not beat a team in the projected field that think they should be in: Texas, Vanderbilt, Indiana, SMU do not have that. So they're sitting on the outside looking in. Teams that are looking for a road win against the top 2 quadrants that don't have one still. How about Maryland, Dayton, SMU, and Wake Forest? So they're all on the outside looking in. And then teams under 500 in meaningful games, meaning just quad 1, 2, and 3 combined. How about Ohio State? 2 games under 500 on the outside looking in. Same goes for Arkansas, Texas, Cincinnati, and Villanova. So if you're a fan of any of the teams I listed, you now know what your team needs to do.
Rocco, I just got to throw this out here. The first two categories you had teams that haven't been, teams that are in the field, teams that don't have road wins over teams, quality teams. Isn't Houston in that same category?
Yeah.
No, Houston is. I thought they had one.
Well,
They don't.
I will throw the profile up here, and not it's just this we didn't discuss Houston in the Big 12, but they BYU, TCU home, Notre Dame neutral, Oklahoma State, K-State road.
Yeah,
good
but
call.
but
They're
this
just
is
so
going
far.
to.
I said bubble teams though. I did not have them on the bubble.
I get they're not a bubble team. I mean, they're number one in the BPI and in Torvik, and number three in Ken
Right.
Palm.
They're going to win the Big 12, but
If
until they do it,
Yeah. If Vanderbilt can get to number one in the BPI, I will change my mind on them.
There we go. But Griggs, you want to finish off the show?
yeah. I've been trying to figure out and think how to phrase this, and I really can't. But so I'll just go right into it and say that like I'm really concerned and distressed about what's happening out in California with the wildfires, not just for those particular schools, although you are about them, but for a lot of the players that are at other schools that come from that part of the country. It really is unsettling and unnerving. I don't think people realize just how heavily recruited, especially in football and basketball, SoCal is. So, our thoughts are with everybody that's going through that. And for lack of a better term, it's starting to get annoying. I remember a few years ago, it was really bad in Oregon. We were all really concerned for our good buddy, like Brian Black, who lives in that area. He had to evacuate, he and his, I think now wife. But I don't know. I'm not smart enough, and I'm not enough of I guess scientist or whatever to know why they keep having these wildfires on the left coast. But once again, it looks like it's going to be disruptive to the season. But that fails in comparison to schools and whole communities that are being affected by this.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, our thoughts and prayers out to everybody out there that's being affected in any way, and anybody who's got family that's being affected. And yeah, while it's one thing, yeah, okay, we have a few games canceled. There's a lot worse things going on, and a lot less important things than basketball games going on out there right now. But on that note, I do want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. On behalf of Matt Zukowski and John Teitel up here, David Griggs and Rocco Miller down below us, check out Bracketeer.org and that new bracket that was just posted today, as Rocco said. I'm Chad Sherwood as well, and thanks for joining us. We'll be back Wednesday night with our next Under the Radar and next Sunday night with our next bracket rundown. Talk to you again real soon.